Chapter 3, Part A.
Of how to tell stories to children. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Tell Stories to Children and Some Stories to Tell by Sarah Cohn Bryant. Chapter 3. Adaptation of Stories for Telling. It soon becomes easy to pick out from a collection of such stories as can be well told. But at no time is it easy to find a sufficient number of such stories. Stories, simple, direct, and sufficiently full of incident for telling, yet having the beautiful or valuable motive we desire for children, do not lie hidden in every book. And even many of the stories which are most charming to read do not answer the double demand, for the appeal to the eye differs in many important respects from that to the ear. Unless one is able to change the form of a story to suit the needs of oral delivery, one is likely to suffer from poverty of material. Perhaps the commonest need of change is the case of a story too long to tell, yet embodying some one of beautiful incident or lesson, or one including a series of such incidents. The story of The Nuremberg Stove by Ouida is a good example of the latter kind. Ruskin's King of the Golden River will serve as an illustration of the former. The problem in one case is chiefly one of elimination. In the other, it is also in a large degree one of rearrangement. In both cases, I have purposely chosen extreme instances as furnishing plainer illustration. The usual story needs less adaptation than these, but the same kind in its own degree. Condensation and rearrangement are the commonest forms of change required. Pure condensation is probably the easier for most persons. With the Nuremberg stove in mind for reference, let us see what the process includes. This story can be readily found by anyone who is interested in the following example of adaptation, for nearly every library includes in its catalogues the juvenile works of Mademoiselle de la Ramée, Ouida. The suggestions given assume that the story is before my readers. The story as it stands is 2,400 words long, obviously too long to tell. What can be left out? Let us see what must be kept in. The dramatic climax toward which we are working is the outcome of August's strange exploit, his discovery by the king and the opportunity for him to become an artist. The joy of this climax is twofold. August may stay with his beloved Hirschvogel, and he may learn to make beautiful things like it. To arrive at the twofold conclusion, we must start from a double premise: the love of the stove and the yearning to be an artist. It will then be necessary to include in the beginning of the story enough details of the family life to show plainly how precious and necessary Hirschvogel was to the children, and to state definitely how August had learned to admire and wish to emulate Hirschvogel's maker. We need no detail beyond what is necessary to make this clear. The beginning and the end of a story decided upon, its body becomes the bridge from one to the other. In this case, it is August's strange journey, beginning with the catastrophe and his grief-dazed decision to follow the stove. The journey is long, and each stage of it is told in full. As this is impossible in oral reproduction, it becomes necessary to choose typical incidents, which will give the same general effect as the whole. The incidents which answer this purpose are the beginning of the journey, the experience on the luggage train, the jolting while being carried on men's shoulders, the final fright and suspense before the king opens the door. The episode of the night in the bric-a-brac shop introduces a wholly new and confusing train of thought. Therefore, charming as it is, it must be omitted. And the secondary thread of narrative interest, that of the prices for which the stove was sold and the retribution visited on the cheating dealers, is also another story and must be ignored. Each of these destroys the clear sequence and the simplicity of plot which must be kept for telling. We are reduced then for the whole to this: a brief preliminary statement of the place Hirschvogel held in the household affections and the ambition aroused in August, the catastrophe of the sale, August's decision, his experiences on the train, on the shoulders of men, and just before the discovery, his discovery, and the denouement. This not only reduces the story to tellable form, but it also leaves a suggestive interest which heightens later enjoyment of the original. I suggest the adaptation of Kate Douglas Wiggin in The Story Hour, since in view of the existence of a satisfactory adaptation it seems unappreciative to offer a second. The one I made for my own use some years ago is not dissimilar to this, and I have no reason to suppose it more desirable. Ruskin's King of the Golden River is somewhat difficult to adapt. Not only is it long, but its style is mature, highly descriptive, and closely allegorical. Yet the tale is too beautiful and too suggestive to be lost to the storyteller, and it is also so recognized a part of the standard literary equipment of youth that teachers need to be able to introduce children to its charm. To make it available for telling, we must choose the most essential events of the series leading up to the climax, and present these so simply as to appeal to children's ears, and so briefly as to not tire them. The printed story is 8,000 words in length. The first 3,000 words depict the beauty and fertility of the Treasure Valley and the cruel habits of Hans and Schwartz, its owners, and give the culminating incident which leads to their banishment by West Wind. This episode, the West Wind's appearance in the shape of an aged traveler, his kind reception by the younger brother, little Gluck, and the subsequent wrath of Hans and Schwartz, with their resulting punishment, occupies about 2,000 words. The rest of the story deals with the three brothers after the decree of West Wind has turned Treasure Valley into a desert. In the little house where they are plying their trade of goldsmiths, the King of the Golden River appears to Gluck and tells him the magic secret of turning the river's water to gold. Hans and Schwartz in turn attempt the miracle, and in turn incur the penalty attached to failure. Gluck tries and wins the treasure through self-sacrifice. The form of the treasure is a renewal of the fertility of Treasure Valley, and the moral of the whole story is summed up in Ruskin's words. So, the inheritance which was lost by cruelty was regained by love. It is easy to see that the dramatic part of the story, and that which most pointedly illustrates the underlying idea, is the triple attempt to win the treasure, the two failures and the one success. But this is necessarily introduced by the episode of the King of the Golden River, which is also an incident sure to appeal to a child's imagination, and the regaining of the inheritance is meaningless without the fact of its previous loss, and the reason for the loss as a contrast with the reason for its recovery. We need, then, the main facts recorded in the first 3,000 words, but the West Wind episode must be avoided, not only for brevity, but because two supernatural appearances, so similar, yet of different personalities, would hopelessly confuse a told story. Our oral story is now to be made out of a condensed statement of the character of the valley and of its owners, and the manner of its loss, the intervention of the King of the Golden River, the three attempts to turn the river to gold, and Gluck's success. Gluck is to be our hero, and our underlying idea is the power of love versus cruelty. Description is to be reduced to its lowest terms, and the language made simple and concrete. With this outline in mind, it may be useful to compare the following adaptation with the original story. The adaptation is not intended in any sense as a substitute for the original, but merely as that form of it which can be told, while the original remains for reading.
End of Chapter 3, Part A.